My name is Kimberly Bryant. I'm the founder and executive director of Black Girls Code. We're a nonprofit organization that was founded in the San Francisco Bay Area, and we really focus on introducing girls of color from underrepresented communities, African American, Hispanic, and Native American communities, to technology, with a really focus on changing the dynamics of diversity in the tech space. When you look at the tech space, it's overwhelmingly male, it's overwhelmingly not people of color across any demographic, male or female. This is one thing that came to my attention as an engineer myself, only because 20 years after I had graduated with my degree in electrical engineering, I just happened to be a mom of a little girl who was more of a geek than I ever was growing up, and was really what we call digital native, and spending an inordinate amount of time, I thought, as a mom, on the computer or doing games and doing all types of technology things. And when I looked towards getting a way to increase her interest on a more productive side and looking at opportunities to build on that interest in a classroom setting, I found that the environments were not very diverse. And to be honest, they weren't diverse at all. There were classrooms and many of these summer opportunities that were full of boys and maybe a handful of girls, and no students of color. And I thought that was quite interesting, given the fact that I graduated, 20 plus years ago, when there were just a handful of women and we weren't at the peak in technology that we are now. So that really propelled me to action, moving out of the biotech sector as an engineering manager to start this organization and really drive at finding solutions to address this problem and really change that ratio. What I found living in the Bay Area is that there's no lack of opportunity or need for engineers, but they just don't seem to be tapping into those communities of color that have lack of access to this technology. So I think it's interesting that we're about 50 years or so past Brown versus Board of Education. When we looked at Brown versus Board of Education, those issues were creating equal opportunities for education for our young people today. So even though we achieved that similar goal with Brown versus Board of Education, I think the playing field has changed. So now when we look at these same schools and educational opportunities for our students, they're not equal, as Nala mentioned before. They're not equal in terms of access to these key core skills that are going to be what our youth need to be equal and active participants in the 21st century and beyond. And that's, I think, the primary issue from a policy perspective that's concerning to me, is that making sure we create educational opportunities for all of our young people and not create a permanent underclass of individuals that are not technically savvy enough or don't have the technical skills to really be active participants and not just consumers in the technology space. So that's really where the focus of my work resides, and also what I hope to add to the conversation.
Thank you. I just have to add this because last year Kimberly won the American Ingenuity Awards from the Smithsonian for the work that she's done, and what particularly resonated with me with this panel as we spoke was an emphasis on K through 12 education, right? Paid parental leave.
Child care tax credit, which
Child
I
care
think the
tax
President
credit.
just announced. So that's
I'm definitely a fan of what Code.org is doing with technology as a science, and really making sure that that's integrated into definitely all of our public schools as a minimum requirement for graduation, students graduating.
What can you do around the technology of social media or anything to have some accountability?
Well, I think some of the things we've started to see with those release of those EEO reports, that was like a big deal because that just happened in the last 6 months or less. But we've been working in space for 3 years. So we've been saying for 3 years, there's a problem, there's really a problem. And I think that the tech companies realize that they're a problem, which was one reason they didn't want to give up those numbers. So seeing that, now that it's fully transparent, That's like really big for everything that's happening in the tech space around youth education, diversity, inclusion. That's like really, I can't stress that enough. That's like key because now it's all on the table. So now we can look at ways, there may be policy ways to address some of this lack of diversity. I think you're going to start see a shift in that now that it's very apparent, how bad the diversity is. And every company, I don't know that there was any company for African Americans that had more than 3%. I don't know if there was one.
None of the large ones.
Yeah, none of them. And this, and when you looked, not all of the numbers that were released, they didn't go really deep, but if you look deep, you could see, someone brought up about where these women that were in the companies were sitting, and they were not in the engineering team at all, so.
Or in senior management.
And,
for the
and
most
senior
part.
management, absolutely. So I think one of the things is that really diving deep into those reports and looking at how these industries are operating and what their employee workforces are now, we can really have a little bit of ammunition to address some of these.